All right, and we're back, and it's COMP308, and it's week 8, lesson 8, part 1, and we're going to talk about the mean stack, a little bit of theory today, and Node.js and MPM, Node Package Manager, right? We'll talk about those things. We kind of did it last week as a preview, right? And we're going to do it again this week, more of a formalized kind of session. And we'll continue tomorrow, I'm hoping, with Express. I want to kind of go into more of Express, understanding what that is and how it all fits. I think because that one of the things with students and with professors when you learn new stuff is trying to figure out where how everything fits together. Because it's like, hey, there's 4 technologies here you have to learn in like a couple weeks, guys. Okay, 4, and we're gonna sit there and try and absorb these 4 technologies and then use them. This is the thing within the next couple weeks, let's say, right? So there's got to be a few challenges and a little bit of practice that we're going to do a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow to get into the things. And then hopefully by next week or so, we'll be able to get into Angular, right? Mongo will probably cover the week after because Angular needs a whole week, right? Like, I'll be honest with you, if you can't do Angular, if you try and do Angular and Mongo in one day, it's too much. Mongo deserves its own week. Mongo's like database, right? So so this is the order that we're going to do things that I'd like to anyway. It's going to be like this. It's going to be Node and Express this week, Angular next week, right? And then we'll cover Mongo the week after. Now, it's a 3-week treatment, so that means like we're sitting at week 8. So it's week 8, week 9, and week 10, right? And then by week 10, you should have your final assignment in place. I'll give it to you, right? Which will be due by week 14, right? So we'll do some sharpening on week 11 and week 12. And what I mean by sharpening is like going over some concepts. I want to take a look at your projects, talk about what the final project can be, and so on. Those kind of things. And then we'll do presentations on week 14. So instead of having an exam, we'll do presentations, which means it'll be worth about 5% of your final or something like that in that range, maybe 10. So that means that when presentations, what I expect you guys to do, just as a preview, we're sitting here at week 8, is most likely your final project I will allow you to work with on your own or with a partner, right? So if you want to build something together. And the reason for that is because there's such limited time in terms of what we're trying to do here, right? So if I was to give you a project that you're going to do on your own, there's only so much you could do within 4 weeks, right? But if you have a partner to work with, the theory is you're supposed to be able to produce more, right? So we'll see how it goes. All right, so let's get into some of this theory, because I think we need to understand when we talk about mean and all that stuff, what the hell is it? Keep hearing about it. So let's talk about mean, and it's really 4 parts like you see here: Mongo, Express, Node, and Angular. Those are the 4 parts of mean, right? And Mongo is really the database, right? So we'll talk about why Mongo as opposed to other types of databases. Traditionally, up until now, PHP has been kind of and ASP.NET, I would say, both those technologies, backends, from a server-side scripting perspective, have been the dominant players in the marketplace. There are more PHP sites out there and ASP.NET sites than the Node sites still, although Node is becoming more and more popular. And on the back end, they needed some kind of database in the back end that would work. The idea here is to create a single programming language to control your entire platform. Right before when we had ASP.NET, you had C#, and then you had some JavaScript, and then you had some other piece parts to it. So that was like the Microsoft solution, right? And it's actually if you don't know ASP.NET, you're kind of hamstrung in terms of the ability for you to get work in most enterprise government, institutions, right? I mean, that you need to have an ASP.NET or the .NET framework. You have to understand that when it comes to web development because it's important. And then, of course, PHP and the whole AMP stack. So Apache, MySQL, PHP is also very popular because from a speed and open source solution perspective, PHP, a whole PHP stack and everything else has been, with MySQL, has been, again, one of the most popular solutions that you can possibly use. Now, the challenge with using MySQL as opposed to a database like Mongo is that MySQL, going back to that, was, again, it's a SQL database. So you have to do querying to your database. It's a different language. You have to know that language too. So you need to know PHP if you're going to do back-end stuff with PHP. Probably a JavaScript, HTML, CSS, right? Think about this. A SQL language, right? SQL query language, right? SQL of some sort, right? Because that's a whole language on its own, how to query the database and all that kind of stuff, right? And there's all these different components for developers. And of course, with different components means there's every piece, every component, how it plugs into other components slows the system down, right? So they thought about this idea of this NoSQL database. And we're going to talk about NoSQL databases when we hit Mongo, right? Right now I'm just going to kind of talk about them. Where there is no SQL commands for the database whatsoever. You can still do CRUD, right? Creation, deletion, all that stuff, updates. The same things that we do with regular databases, you can still do with MongoDB and NoSQL. But the beauty of it is you use a JSON format. So if you know JSON, right, the format we talked about before, and you can create JSON objects. And I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a refresher of what that is, right, as we approach Mongo again, right, because we need to remember, some people forgot what JSON is or you haven't been exposed to it. Although theoretically you should be learning it when you learn JavaScript. Right? So as soon as you learn JavaScript, JSON and XML, you should learn those two things at the same time. So I kind of did it already, talked about it a little bit before, but we need to do it again, right? Because it's like almost like a refresher of what JSON is. If you don't know JSON, JavaScript notation, that's really what it is, then what ends up happening is the object notation that if you don't know how to use it, you can't really understand the shape of Mongo. It's pretty simple though, so I don't think you're gonna have a problem with that. Okay, so that's the database piece. So why NoSQL? Why? Because it's simple commands. It's all in JavaScript again. So even the backend database looks like JavaScript when you look at it, the way it's structured and everything else. And then you have Express as the web server framework. See, Node really is your server platform. And we talk about what a server platform is in a bit, but really what it is it's just almost like the container for your server framework, right? So Express sits inside of Node, right, and allows us to do routing and communication with the MongoDB database. That's really what Express does for us. The power of Express is it allows us to do routing and it allows us to use partials, right? Which almost like if you think about HTML. Before we were doing HTML with one big page or sets of pages. But think about this in the future, just like we did it with PHP. Did you guys take PHP before? Okay, if you have a little bit of PHP knowledge, PHP, what they allow you to do is use these partials, right? So you can sit there and say, okay, here's my header partial. It's going to be stored in its own file. It'll be a header.php file as an example. And the header file will include all the regular header information, the same header information from page to page. So you have like this continuity, if you will, right? All your headers look exactly the same with some additional information. And a great example of that is when you use WordPress. WordPress is an example of where you use headers and footers and containers, different kind of container pages for your content. And what you do is you swap out those pieces of the page as opposed to reloading the whole page. So you have a standard header and a standard footer and a standard content section, and then your content section keeps swapping out. And you make a few adjustments to your header and footer according to what your navigation is. So this idea is what we took into Express. So you can do the same kind of thing with Express calls, right? Just like we would normally do with PHP, right? But instead of using another language again, PHP, you're doing it with JavaScript. It's the beautiful thing. So that's where Express sits in the framework. And now we have Angular. Right? So Node and Express, kind of the actual server, that replaces Apache, pretty much. If you think about the Apache servers or even IIS, that's what Express and Node would do for us, right? Where Angular.js, that's the front-end framework. Now we've done almost 7 weeks of front-end stuff, right? We did Foundation, and we also did, after the Foundation framework, we did jQuery Mobile for specific, right? Well, when we talk about Angular, I'm also going to inject in there a third front-end framework, which is very popular these days, which is Bootstrap. So we're going to talk Bootstrap a little bit because Bootstrap and Angular love each other, all right? Now, the great thing about Angular, when we'll get into Angular, we'll talk about this as well. Angular can work with any framework. You can use it with Foundation. You can use it with jQuery Mobile. You can use it on its own, right? And the great thing about that is it allows you to do two-way binding, and it really implements this whole MVC design pattern for us when it comes for us to build websites. So it works nicely with Express because Express acts as its routing system. And Angular, what we do with Angular is we create our controllers, our models, and our views. This is what we're going to be talking about, that kind of separate our application so that it is more robust and more scalable as we build larger and more detailed and complex applications, right? Because right now, when we build applications, like here at school, you can outthink the application, right? You can sit there and go, I know how to build that. Like even the portfolio page, it was more difficult, maybe one of the biggest ones you built, right? To date, perhaps. But the thing is, if you think about it, it's still quite simple. The patterns to create your page is, fairly straightforward. But what about in the future when a client asks you to work in a team of developers where all you do is work on the view, right? And the other developer works on the model, and the third developer works on the controller. That can happen, right? This is where complex applications come into play, or sometimes you're working on the view and the controller because they kind of go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, there's complex applications that are being developed that are, let's say, enterprise level, that you need to split up your functionality to create a more structure so that code is more organized. That's a very, very important piece of the MVC framework. So that's really kind of a real overview of what those pieces are. And again, let's talk about Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node for a second. And again, for the websites, I'm just going to skip out of this PowerPoint presentation for a second. We did it last week, but we'll do it again. So let's go into Mongo. If I go to mongodb.org, that's the website location for MongoDB, right? And if you notice, it says Agile and Scalable. We're going to talk about how to install Mongo locally. And what I want to do, which is really, really important, is I want to move to using Mongo. You can do it here in the browser, by the way. They have some really cool, on the MongoDB website, they have some really cool opportunities for you to try it out here, live, right? But the great thing about Mongo is that it's easily ported to a cloud environment, and we're going to do that. Well, I want you to create, by the way, before next class, here's your little homework, right? There's this thing called Mongo Lab, right? Mongo Lab. And what you can do is you can create a free account for Mongo Lab. And what Mongo Lab is and for our purposes, by the way, I mean, there's definitely a paid-for service. And when you do create your database, just to let you know, we'll go over this as we approach Mongo again, but I would recommend getting yourself set up ahead of time for Mongo Lab, at least before, not next week, but the week after. Again, it's a free service for us, definitely a paid-for option as well. You definitely get 500 megabytes for free. That's way more than we need for this course. Like, who's going to make a 500 megabyte database? It's going to be high. It's going to be huge for you to make something like that, right? So lots and lots of room for us, and it's definitely cloud-based, so you don't have to worry about doing things locally. And the great thing about that is when you hand in your work for your final project, if you use MongoDB, I have access to it, right? We don't have to worry about you giving me your database files, me loading them in, me testing it out, manually on my server or your server. It's on the cloud. Okay, so MongoDB and Mongo Lab is something we're going to be using. So let's look at that as well, right? And again, this is all separate people taking care of all this stuff. So even though we're talking about the mean stack, Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node, different sets of developers take care of all these things. There's not one set of developer that owns it all, right? It's just a way for us to kind of use different technologies to package all of them together. All right, let's take a look at Express. We're going to go with the whole mean idea, right? Here's Express. Express has its own website as well. It's called expressjs.com, right? And the Express.js website also has a really, really nicely documented API. They have a guide that's in here as well, how to do routing, middleware, all that kind of stuff that we're going to cover. And there's also the API reference here about how to use Express in detail. So we're going to be talking about this probably tomorrow, right? Okay, so that's Express for you, and we're going to kind of hit it a little bit today if we have a chance. Like, kind of do a preview again today, kind of building a site for ourselves and so on. But mostly I want to work on NPM more than anything else. Okay, so that's Express. And again, there's two flavors that we can use. When we use Express, there's these two template engines that Express comes with. One of them is called Jade, which we will not be using, right? And the other one is called EJS, right? So those are the two templating engines that Express comes with. EJS is a little bit easier to use because it looks just like HTML with a little bit of additional syntax that's kind of added in, right? So that's why I recommend we use Express and EJS, and we'll talk about how to do that as we go. Okay, and again, there's the API reference, all kinds of advanced topics, and so on. All right, so that's Express. And the A in our main stack is Angular. So here's another piece of little homework I want you to do, which I think is awesome. Okay, there is a free course online that I want you to take, and if you go to angularjs.org, right? And I think this will make you guys very comfortable with the Angular framework, right? So there's a bit of homework. There's no book for this course necessarily, right? But here's a couple pieces of homework that I'm going to give you, right? If you go to Learn under the angularjs.org website, underneath there's something called Free Course. Take a look, right? Free Course, angularjs.org, right? If you guys are all with me, okay? I want you to do this course. It's an awesome course. It's free, right? And the great thing about it is if you go to Free Course, they actually have this free course that's sponsored by Google, because remember, AngularJS is created by Google. We'll go into what that is. But it is actually made by Code School, right? And the great thing about this thing is if you can actually go through these 5 levels, if you actually follow the course, this might take you a day, or 2. If you kind of do piece parts to it, there's 5 levels of the course. You'll understand things about the container, the way that we use closures in Angular, the way that we do controllers and models. And I'm going to go over this stuff with you again, but it's really great to have a preview of what this is going to be. So this is a couple things you need to do. So sign up with MongoDB, MongoDB Lab, right? Take this AngularJS course, and I want this AngularJS course because we're going to cover AngularJS. So again, it's mean. So we're going to do Node and Express today and tomorrow. Next week we're going to do 1 full day of Angular, or 2 days of Angular. Let's say on Tuesday and Wednesday, right? And then the week after we're going to hit Mongo and MongoLab and how to connect all that together, right? So I need you guys to get into Angular. So for next week, you guys already have a basis of Angular before next week. So when we start talking Angular, you're up to date with me, right? So again, this free course that's online, I highly recommend you do it as soon as possible. What I can do to give you incentive, to give you some incentive to do the course, is, because I know some people need it, right, is I'll put up a Dropbox, right, and there'll be some questions that I'll put up on about the course, about actually doing the course, because basically there'll be some things that I'm going to ask you to do with the course by going through all the different levels, and then that way when you actually do your little mini course here, it's almost like a mini game, right? You play a game, some kind of role-playing game, and then you have to crack a safe as a mini game, right? This is like the mini game for our course, right? You got to do this little mini course, right? Again, five levels. It'll be due next week, right? And it'll be worth some kind of marks, right? Yeah. It does if you do it within the same browser session. If you kill browsers and move to a different IP, But it's okay. And what they do is they actually use, the great thing about this course, which I highly recommend from Code School for you guys to take, free, right? It's a whole Angular course, covers all the piece parts to Angular. The great thing about this course is that it gives you badges, and it's almost like it uses gamification to kind of get you excited about kind of making things go. There are going to be parts where you stumble in this course, right? When you do it, and you're going to go, what happened? How come it's not working properly? And it'll allow you to continue. It won't stop you from moving on. But I highly recommend you try and figure out how to make things go and get all your points, because there's going to be points. They give you like 250 points for completing this part, or 250 points for completing that part in Code School. You don't have to sign up for Code School. It literally is a free course. You just start going, and away you go. All right, so that's, it's called Shaping Up with AngularJS. It's almost like an intro, scratch the surface course of Angular, but it's actually quite good because it gives you all the piece parts you need to know for next week, which we're going to talk about again, right? So if we're on the same page, this is like your homework, your reading homework, or your doing homework, if you will, for next week, and I'll give you some kind of marks for it. Maybe 1 or 2%, something like, if you've completed it, then we'll ask you a couple questions, and then you answer some stuff on, next week. It might be almost like a little quiz equivalent for the test, like a little thing that you do on your own, right? So you figure it won't be a quiz that you do in class. It'll be like a take-home quiz, and the only way you can know how to do it is if you do your little course, right? So I'll kind of put that together today or tomorrow, and then it'll be up on Dropbox to give you incentive to do your course, okay? 1 or 2%, not sure what it will be, and it'll be bonus. It won't be calculated into your final mark. It'll be on top of everything else. So if you're really doing well, you'll get extra marks. If you're not doing well, it'll help you out to boost your mark a little bit, which I'm all for, right? Because that means it's good learning for you guys, good incentive. I'll do the same thing for Mongo, right? So when you do your Mongo Lab, when you sign up for Mongo Lab, which is a little piece part, signing up for Mongo Lab will be signing up for GitHub, right? To me, I'll give you like 1% for signing up for Mongo Lab. You send me your account details. We'll talk about how to do that, and so on. And then it'll be another like up to 3% that you're getting for doing nothing other than doing what I'm asking you to do, like doing your homework, right? Which to me is good incentive for you guys to get it going, right? So that's Mongo, Angular, Express, right? So far we've talking about, and Node, but we haven't talked about the Node piece. So again, this is Angular. Let's go to Node. And Node.js lives here, nodejs.org, right? You don't need to create any accounts for Node.js, but I think the piece parts, there are 2 real big piece parts to Node, all right? And actually, this is what we're going to be talking about mostly today. And installing Node isn't enough. Like when I install my Node server, and if you go to your Node server with me right now, let's just do this. I'm going to pull up my terminal here on the Mac side. All right, my terminal is going to look a little different than yours because I'm using a Linux-based interface for now. I'm going to switch over to the PC side in a second. But you should be able to go to a command prompt on your PC and do something like this: node ---- version, right? And it should come up with version 12, right? And if you're version 10.36 or something like that, which I know that some of these systems are, you can upgrade that by downloading and installing Node here from the website, like we talked about last week. Okay, so Node ---- version does that. But Node on its own, right, is a platform, and we'll talk about that, what that is in a bit. But it doesn't do much, really. You can do a lot by itself, but the power of Node is using modules, right? So this is where, if I was going to talk about complexity, we talked last part of the semester, like the first half of the semester, I was like, hey, we're using Visual Studio, and it's nice and easy, and it's drag and drop and everything else. Well, this is where we're going to use command line, and this is, we're going to go to the next level here with the ability for us to do this, right? So if I go over to the PC side, and if I run my command prompt here, again, it'll be the same. I can go, I can say node ---- version, and then I should have the same thing on both sides. There are some differences, though, and again, I'm running version 12. You guys are probably running 10.36, I'm guessing? What? 12. Is it 12? Right on, right on. You guys are good. You guys are running 12 over there, too?
Not yet.
Come on.
I haven't installed it.
All right, well, install it for yourself. If you're running 12, that's great. You running 12 as well? Good. So we need, if we're all running 12, we're on the same page. But Node by itself isn't as powerful as it would be unless you're using something called MPM. Okay, so this is another thing we have to kind of look at. If you go to MPMJS.com, right, MPMJS.com, here we are. It shows us a couple of other things. Look, it talks about here about Express. It talks about Grunt. We're not going to probably use Grunt. That's kind of almost like again, it's npm www.mpmjs.com. Grunt is a little older. I want to use something called Gulp, which is something that I'm a lot more comfortable using. And when we talk about creating websites and stuff for Node and so on, the great thing is we want to try and put together some automation for our websites, right? A lot of times what we want them to do is we update a view, right? I don't want to go and save the view and then update the package and then re-update everything. It takes some time to do all that stuff. So to use Node, because it's all command line tools, a lot of times it helps us for a web workflows perspective to set up automation. And we'll talk about how to do that as we go forward. Not today, because it's a little bit of an advanced topic, but as we hit things like Angular and Mongo in those weeks, we'll probably talk a little bit about web workflows and automation. And again, you can, the Node package manager allows you to install all this stuff. Hey, look, there's CoffeeScript. This is pretty cool. A lot of times Express users also use something called CoffeeScript, which if you've used TypeScript before in my classes, we talked about TypeScript actually at the beginning of this class as well. It's syntactic sugar, if you will. Actually, there's something called Sweet.js too, which does kind of the same thing. But CoffeeScript, Sweet.js, TypeScript, what they do is they allow you to transcompile into pure JavaScript. But it's a really cool object-oriented language methodology, if you will, that you can use. Right? So this is really, really cool. And there's also another thing called Yeoman. And what Yeoman does, this is called Yo, right? What Yeoman allows us to do, and this, look at all these piece parts to NPM, right? Like when I talked to you guys, in the beginning, you guys like, I want to learn Node. Yeah, okay. Node is not something you learn overnight. Node we're going to be learning from now until probably the remainder of the semester. Like that's an NPM, all these different piece parts. Angular, we're going to be talking all these things over and over again. But when we use Node, we need to use NPM because NPM adds, think about them as plugins, all right, or extensions. So we in Visual Studio we have an extension manager, right? Well, here for Node, because it's all console based, we use NPM. And then it kind of takes us down to this next question, and I want to ask you guys what you think, right? Because I need to put some feedback together here, right? Question: do we use Visual Studio with Node? Is that the right thing to do, right? I want you to think about this for a second. What other tools do you have available to you that you can use? And please don't say, the Microsoft product, huh? You could use a text editor. I highly don't recommend that, right? We could still use Visual Studio. It's not a negative. It needs a little bit of configuration for us to use Visual Studio. And the reason for that is because Visual Studio, it plays okay with Node. There's some plugins for Node and Visual Studio, but a lot of the tutorials that you're going to find online work really nicely with something called brackets and Sublime. All right, those are the two that you're going to find a lot out there, right?
Isn't Sublime text editor?
What's that?
Isn't Sublime text editor?
It's more of an IDE, and I'll tell you why. Because it gives you a lot of code hinting and everything else.
To me, I consider it text editor.
I know. It's a little bit better, but the reason why I recommend even not using Sublime and going with brackets is that brackets is a free open source kind of software that's sponsored by Adobe. Let me go to brackets, okay, for a second, right? And it's under brackets.io. Now you can download and install brackets for free. And for us to stay focused and be together on this thing, I recommend we all sit there and we all use the same platform. Now, I'm not saying that Visual Studio isn't something we're going to get to. Okay, maybe we'll get back to Visual Studio because I like using Visual Studio because you guys know Visual Studio. But the challenge when using Visual Studio and command line is we're going to be switching in and out of Visual Studio anyway. Number one. Second thing is, you're not going to ever use your IIS server, right? Which is part of, like IIS Express is part of Visual Studio. So remember when you press that play button? You're never going to do that, right? Because you're going to be using the Node server, right? So that means that half the functionality of Visual Studio, we're just taking away. We're just going click, click. We're not going to use that. And the other part is, Visual Studio has some support for code hinting, right, for Node, but not very much support for things like EJS, which we're going to get into. So you have to configure Visual Studio. So I'm going to give you both options, but I recommend highly, and this is something that I would do if I were you. I'm going to be using brackets here in my demonstrations, and I recommend that you download and install brackets for yourself, because I think it's a good, another little tool for you guys to have in your toolbox when it comes to web development. It's open source, so you don't have to pay anything, and it's cross-platform. So you can use it on Mac, you can use it on Windows, and you can use it on Linux if you're a Linux person. All right, so brackets is where I would go with this. And again, it's definitely an Adobe-driven product, right? The great thing about brackets, if I was to run brackets for a second, I'm just going to do this on the Mac side for a second, right? So I'm going to go into Developer. And then here's my brackets install for Mac. This is what it looks like, right? Error loading project. Yeah, because I deleted it. Oh, and look, there's a little bit of an update. I'll just do the update while we're at it. Here, why don't we just install brackets together? Because I gotta do an update anyway. Huh? What about that? Let me just kill this thing, and then I will. I'll go into download brackets. Let's do it together, right? Why not? Since we're doing it right now. So I'll go download brackets 1.2. I'm doing it here on the Mac. Yours would be slightly different because you're on a PC. Yeah.
So with this assignments and work that we will do in the future for the rest of the semester, will we be connecting to school server or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think
so
I'm gonna
use my own laptop.
Yes. What I will be also doing, you can always use your own laptop. But what I'll be doing,
Doesn't connect to things.
like what?
Like school server or database doesn't connect.
I will never make you use. We're going to do a couple things. One, we've already used GitHub Pages, right, for some of your stuff. We're going to continue to use some of that, but on top of that, we're also going to use a service called Heroku, which is another thing I want you to sign up for points, right? So there's like almost 5% here I'm giving you. Come on, right? But we're going to get to that in a second. Let's download and install brackets. Let's do this together, all right? So we got to talk about brackets today a little bit as well. Again, this is almost like let's set up our environment time. It's almost like we're starting our course off again, right? And in many ways we are, because we've already finished off our front-end technologies foundation, jQuery mobile, and then we're going to also talk about Bootstrap in the second half. You know, so you get all the latest and greatest frameworks that you're going to know, as well as you know, some really cool tools. Okay, so if you've downloaded and installed brackets, I'm going to run brackets here. So on the Mac side, it's going to look like this. On the PC side, I'll do it on the PC side for you too if you're slow. Right, so here I'm just going to drag and drop. This is how easy it is on the Mac. I drag and drop, and I'll say replace, where brackets will replace kind of right over my other stuff. And that's fine. If I need extensions, I can always download them on brackets anyway. Okay, cool. So I've got brackets. Let's do the same thing on the PC side. So, I mean, I've already got brackets on the PC side, but let's just do it as if I'm going to give you some more time here. So I'm going to go download brackets, right? And I think it's a free install for now. Here it is, and it's 43 megs, so it'll take a few minutes to do everything, or maybe a couple seconds on the school server. There we go. And I already have brackets installed, but installing it again isn't going to kill me. So I'll do that. I'll wait for that to start up. And it tells me the location of the brackets. I'm going to say next, install, ask me for permission. I say yes, and then I go forward. Now the school server may be a little different. I'm using Windows 8, 8.1. You might be using Windows 7. But at the end of the day, you know, we're going to move, you know, towards this kind of thing. So on both sides, whether you're PC or Mac, and I'm going to switch back and forth in this second half between PC and Mac. Frequently, so you can see the differences, because I want you guys to be, in my opinion, platform agnostic, right? I don't want you to worry about, I'm a PC guy or girl, or I'm a Mac guy or girl, or I'm a Linux person. You shouldn't be anything. You should use the best tools for the job. That's the answer. Today it's PC, tomorrow it's Mac, third day it's something else, right? And that's how we have to kind of treat it. As developers, we shouldn't be worried about our tools and the platform we use. We should always try and be adaptive. Now, there's some camps out there that tell you, hey, don't run to the latest and greatest because the latest and greatest is changing, right? So today, latest and greatest is A, and tomorrow, latest and greatest is B, right? Stick with something that works. Okay, so I've got brackets on my Windows install here. In order for me to use brackets, I've got to kind of go through here, and I'm going to set up a kind of a link for brackets. So if I can find it where it is. Because otherwise, you know, I won't be able to use it. Because it doesn't install automatically for you anyway unless you go through here. And if you notice, I've got, you know, my server, my Visual Studio, all that stuff is here. And it'll be similar for you guys when it comes to installing things, right? So on your Windows 7 machine, you should have it in your program folder. And again, I'm just going to set it up so that I never have to kind of go through here again. We'll only do this one time. I'm not seeing it, but not that it's not there. There it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say pin to taskbar, because I like doing that a lot more. And I'm going to go back to my desktop for a second. So here's brackets down here for myself on the taskbar. And on the Windows side, it looks like this. Here's a great thing about brackets. Now, if you notice, there's a bunch of little things here on the right-hand side, right? And I'm just going to kind of kill this file because I've got a couple things open. Because I've already installed brackets before on this thing. So I'm going to kind of kill this. On this piece here, this green piece, take a look, right? You've got this little Lego brick. That's what it looks like, a little Lego brick. This is the extension manager where you can download and install extensions, right? And we're going to do that frequently in brackets because there's some really cool things. Like, for example, I can update Emmet. Emmet is like that whole Zen coding thing that helps us write code faster. So I would do that. I also have things like I got a UTF-8 converter that I'm just going to update because I've got these things to update right now. And I also have things like, look, I have AngularJS code hints you can download for brackets, all these other things that we're going to do, as well as you also have jQuery mobile code hinting. There's a bunch of extensions that are free that you can download and install. So that's what the little Lego piece looks like, right? Just going to reload my brackets for a second. And there we go. And then the other piece that I have in here is this little lightning bolt. Well, the lightning bolt, what it does is it gives us a live preview, which is kind of cool. And it's different than other websites because let's say, for example, I've got my index.html. Here's a dummy index.html. It comes with brackets, getting started with brackets. And if I click on this live preview, what it does is it throws together a little website, a little server that's internal, right? So here's, of course, not working. But and of course, we don't have our index.html. Let's try it on the other side. You should have this working actually for you. Might be because I need to update. New extension, enable extensions. And let's try that out. And it says, unable to load preview page. For more information, see troubleshooting. But sometimes it works. For me, it works fine on the Mac side, and I'm sure it will work here. I've got a different Windows preview than you do, so yours may work and mine may not. But the way it works in brackets on the Mac side, here, let's put it up on the Mac side, and let's see how it works, just to give you a preview. We're not talking about that a lot here. Again, I'll have to do the same thing. So if you notice, I've got the same kind of idea. This is stuff that I've been working on with Angular and Node, kind of a Node project that I have open. Well, if I look at this, again, this gives us different things like documents toolbar, bracket snippets, JS lint. You can set up all this stuff right here in brackets, and it's kind of piece part extensions that you can add in. But let's say, for example, I'm just going to kind of close off. I'm going to close off this stuff here, so I'm going to go and close all, right? And the great thing about using brackets is, I'm just going to kind of do this. If, let's say, I want to create together a new, I'm just going to eject this. I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop, which I recommend we play on the desktop. just to keep it simple. So here's my new folder, and my new folder is going to be called, let's say, I'll call it, Node test or something like that, or Node demo. Let's do that together. Call it Node demo. And don't leave any spaces, like Node demo like that. Well, the great thing is you can, let's pull this over here. You can drag and drop from your folder right into brackets like this. And what it'll do is it'll actually zero in on your project. So there is no setting up a project like we do with Visual Studio or Eclipse, Tana, other kind of editors. It's just right here. So and if I add something into my project, like for example, let's say I want to add in a new index.html file. All right, so I'm going to go new file. I just right click to do that, and I say index.html, and then I start typing in a basic file. And let's do this by going into Bootstrap. Hey, we talked Bootstrap a little bit. We've talked Foundation. Let's go into Bootstrap really quickly, and I'll go into, it's called getbootstrap.com. This is where we're going to go. Getbootstrap.com. Again, Bootstrap is very similar to Foundation, and it uses a 12-column grid and so on. Same kind of idea that we use for Foundation. And we're going to learn it as we go. Again, if you want to, you can use Foundation in your final project. It works the same, right? And if I go to Getting Started, this link here, and if I scroll down, Bootstrap has this really cool little starter page. Here's my basic template for Bootstrap. Take a look, right? Under Getting Started. And if I copy all this stuff, I'm going to copy this template. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back into brackets and paste it. Well, it gives us this Bootstrap 101 template, right? And it gives us almost like this. If you notice, there's a bootstrap min.css. We haven't downloaded that yet. And there's also this bootstrap min.js file with jQuery that we're going to have to add in here. So let's add those sections in there. So one is, I'm just doing all this in brackets, right? So if I go back to my folder for a second, I'm not going to kill this. I'm going to minimize this for a second. Go back into my folder, right? And I need some, almost like a structure for my folders. Well, I know that, this is the wrong one. I know that in my Node demo, I need to have a couple of folders. So one of them is going to be called JS, and the other one is going to be called CSS, right? So JS and CSS are there. And if you notice, when I do that, JS and CSS appear instantly inside my node, inside my editor, right? Okay, cool. In order for us to continue, we need a couple of those files in there, and we need to download the Bootstrap framework. Again, it's kind of very simple. Let's just do that, and we'll do that by going back into that website.
Can we use this again?
You can, if you want to, but let's do the local files here for a reason. So here's my my Bootstrap framework. I want to go back to the main page and say download Bootstrap. I've already done that. So if I go into my downloads, and if I look at Bootstrap 3.32, which is the distro, right? That's what it looks like. You get your CSS, your JavaScript. When you download and download Bootstrap, you get these files. What I want is my bootstrap.min.css file. I want that copied into my my new folder. So let me just minimize all this. Pull up my new folder. Here's my new folder. I have both folders here. And I'm just going to copy and paste my bootstrap.min.css. I'm going to copy this. So not without knowing Bootstrap at all. I'm just doing this, right? And let's just say if you don't know Bootstrap. And in here in your JavaScript stuff, in your JavaScript section, you also have this bootstrap.min.js. You need that piece as well. So I'm going to copy that. I'll put that in my JavaScript section. And one thing I also need is jQuery. Because without jQuery, Bootstrap is not functional, just like Foundation, right? You can't use Bootstrap without jQuery, right? So again, I'm going to go into download the latest version of jQuery. And where am I going to go for that? jQuery. So I go back to jQuery.com, right? All these all this technology, right? Download, and it looks like the latest version is download. You can download version 1.11.2 or 2.1.3. If you look at the template that we got from Bootstrap, though, what is it looking for? 1.1.1.2 So I think this is the one that I would recommend. We can certainly download the other one, but I like to use the jQuery that's compatible with the frameworks that I download, right? Just in case from a backwards compatibility perspective, right? So going back to this, if I click download and it tells me which one I want, I can choose between jQuery 1.x and jQuery 2. In this particular case, last time we did jQuery 2. This particular case, I'll do 1.12, right? Which is, this is the compressed production version, not the uncompressed one you want to work with. So I'm going to click on this one. I'll download jQuery. And in this particular case, again, I'll go back into downloads where I got jQuery, and I'll pull it into my JavaScript library, JavaScript folder. There it is. So I got jQuery. Okay, so I got all the piece parts that I want, right? I got all the piece parts that I want. And now let's just check to see if we need anything else for this little Bootstrap example to go. Well, if you notice, jQuery actually is using the CDN, right? I'm going to redirect it so it doesn't use the CDN, so it uses me. Let's try this for the first time. I'm going to start typing JS. I'm going to erase this up. Take a look. If I start typing JS, it gives me a code hint. If I kind of go into that code hint, and if I press enter, it says, which one do you want? I want jQuery. And it actually allows me, helps me kind of put together the source path. Okay, so there's jQuery. I kind of use jQuery locally as opposed to jQuery on the CDN. And I've got I got to make sure my CSS, my bootstrap.min.css is there, and my bootstrap.min.js is inside the JavaScript file. Right. So I've got all those piece parts together. That's great. I'll kill this now. And if I want to see a live demo, first of all, I want to save everything. So I want to save my file, right? Make sure everything's saved. And then I click this little lightning bolt, and voila, I should have my live demo, hello world. Okay? And that's using Bootstrap. So again, if it all works. To check to see if it all works, I can go to More Tools, go to JavaScript Console like we normally would do, and see if there's any errors. We don't have any errors here. But really, from the get-go, what Bootstrap gives us is a framework of putting things together. One of the things to know that Bootstrap is working, if you want to use Bootstrap, you need to create a container class. So let's use a div really quickly. And if you notice, I'm using emmet, which is if I just type the div, let me go back. And if I go dot and the container class that I want to use, I want to call it content container, right? That's what it is. And then container. I can do that. And once I've done that, I've got a div that's in here, right? Content container. And I can put this hello world in here. Let's just kind of cut and paste that. And underneath the hello world, let's add a paragraph tag. Right, there it is. And let's use some lorem text. Right? And we're good to go. Yes?
Sorry, what is it called? Emmet? How do you spell it?
Emmet?
Oh, Emmet.
E-M-M-E-T. It's we did it. Zen Coding was part of Visual Studio 2013. It was called Zen Coding as part of the Visual Studio Web Essentials package. But here in brackets, it's called Emmet, and you got to download and install this little package. Okay, cool. So we got this little example text, and if I go back to my browser, right, as an example, here I am. I'm loading my browser. Look, here's how Bootstrap would already give me some alignment here of how exactly like Foundation would have given it to us before, right? And if you notice, I've got some spacing on both sides of Bootstrap. Again, Bootstrap plays very nicely with Angular, and that's why I'm introducing it to you guys. But you don't have to use it. If you want to use Foundation, if you're happy using Foundation, if you know Foundation, and you made it for your first website, that's fine. And remember what I told you before, your portfolio website we're going to be using over and over again, right? It may not be the structure we're using, but definitely the content, right? So I'm going to chop up your portfolio website in the next assignment and use it with Express and hopefully Angular. All right, so we'll talk about how that works. All right, so again, this is Bootstrap, and now here's what the live example would look like. I'm just going to kind of modify something here. Take a look. So I've got my hello world. Here's my hello world, right? And then in here, I'm going to add in another kind of paragraph tag right, with additional text. Now watch how fast this is. I go lorem, I don't know, 50, right? And then all of a sudden I have 50 more, and then I go back, and now I've got another piece of text. Instant. I don't have to reload my browser. I don't have to do any of that stuff. It's automatically, you automatically see the changes here on the side, right? So that's why the live preview works really well. And for when we do Node and all that kind of stuff, this is super important because otherwise you're constantly reloading stuff. You don't want that. You want this to be reloaded for you. You guys getting that with on the PC side? Okay, so that's really the first piece I want to talk to you about, some of the tools we need. One more tool. This is the last one I want you to sign up for. By the way, I'll put all this on Dropbox for you in a bit. All right, so I'm going to I'll leave this open. I'm going to go into another tool called Heroku. Okay, here's our Heroku. And Heroku is a cloud-based service. And I'll just kind of log in here, right? I've already created my little account, right? And the great thing about it is it supports things like Node.js, right? So if you want to run a Node.js server on the cloud, right, here's a good example of how we're going to do this. We're going to use a combination of, we're going to go to the cloud services now, Heroku, right, combined with our Mongo Lab. So everything we do is run on the cloud. So you don't have to worry about hosting here at the school or on GitHub, although GitHub and Mongo Lab also work nicely together. They play nice. And so does Azure as we're going forward. We might have a representative from Microsoft come in and do a little bit of an Azure demo near the end of our course. And he's going to come in and we're going to see how we can link Azure with Node and Mongo, right? Because you can do that too. And if you haven't created an Azure account, you can do that for free. But we're going to get kind of I think a 6 months package we should be able to get from our Microsoft representative. So here's Heroku. So I recommend, again, you go in here and you can create a PHP website, you can create a Node website, a Python website, Java, whatever, Scala and Clojure. Clojure is a totally different kind of doing things. But I've got one little demo that I was learning with. So again, a few piece parts for you to learn and to kind of sign up with. I want you to sign up with Mongo Lab. I'm going to give you 1% for that, right? I want you to sign up with Heroku. I'm going to give you 1% for that. I want you to sign up for, and take your course on AngularJS. I'm going to give you 2% for that. So that's 4 right now. And maybe there'll be a 5th coming up, right? So I'll give you like almost 5% for doing these little tasks. Why? Because this is part of our course. If you don't have these piece parts, you're not going to be able to do your assignments going forward, right?
Also install brackets, right? Yeah.
Brackets, okay, yeah, there we go. And brackets, if you install brackets on your local PC, I'll give you 1%. Right. There's your one. Thank you, Lilia. She's perfect, right? Huh? You already got that part. I'm going to give you that as well. So you get all these different piece parts. I know, don't worry. All right, so again, so you've got this brackets we're going to work with and everything else. I'm going to just pause the video here because we've done a bunch of little things, and then we'll continue with more theory and some other things we can do here with brackets and Node and Express.